When I was a young man, I carried my pack, and I lived the free life of a rover.
Hi, this is Sandy Baird with a commentary from the Vermont Institute of Civic and International Involvement, or VICI. At the 11th hour, on the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918, the guns of World War I were silent. Behind the Armistice were the trench warfare on the Western Front, the horrifying loss of lives on both the Western and the Eastern fronts of Europe and the rest of the world, the furious battles over inches of territory, like at the Somme, Verdun, Passchendaele, and worse, the predestined slaughters, like the Australians by the Turks at Gallipoli. Ahead was the uncertain world of the 20th century, with unease deepening as the Bolsheviks swept Russia in the 10 days which shook the world and brought to power the first communist nation. In Germany, resentment simmered as the Versailles Peace Treaty unconditionally blamed the crushed nation of Germany for the disaster of the First World War. That worldwide conflagration was finally over, and the people of the world, stunned by the vastness of the conflict and numbed by grief, tried to pretend that this would never happen again, that this was the war to end all wars, and that the world had been finally made safe for democracy. That was the promise of President Woodrow Wilson of the United States. To the cheers of the victors and the doubts of the realistic, Johnny came marching home. Now, more than 100 years later, as we survey the 20th century and the beginnings of the 21st century, we, with empathy with those who serve, ask, was it worth it? The world after the Armistice quickly saw that nothing had changed. Germany, forced to admit total guilt for the war in the peace treaty at Versailles and forced to unconditionally surrender, nursed a grudge, which soon evolved into the Nazi movement and that party which vowed to take back German pride, German empire, and they promised a revenge for the stab in the back that the Germans had suffered from the Allies, the British, the French, and the Americans. Within Germany, the Germans quickly labeled in an anti-Semitic frenzy the internal enemies of the German people were the Jews. The old imperial empires, now swollen with the addition of the German colonies and with the colonies of the defeated Ottoman Empire in the old oil-rich and strategic Middle East. Behind the Russian borders, the new Soviet Union withdrew from the war in defeat on the Eastern Front in 1917, and they began to build a new communist nation. Anxious to preserve its revolution against the anti-communist powers, the USSR announced itself as a competitor to the West, to the chagrin, especially of the rising power of the United States, as they, the United States, stirred the seeds of a Cold War and perhaps a new hot war against the USSR. And the United States emerged now as the strongest of the superpowers, and they planned to supersede the old colonialists and the USSR as the new kid on the block and the world's mightiest bully, now armed with the atomic bombs of the 20th century, which the United States used for the first and still yet only time that those nukes have been used, then against Japan in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Without questioning the notions that had caused World War I, that nations built on nationalism, racism, an arms race, entangling alliances, militarism, and a greedy capitalist empire always caused trouble, the old order repeated itself and made the continued and increased horrors of World War II and beyond to Korea, Vietnam, Cuba, Central America, Latin America, Nicaragua, Afghanistan, Syria, the Middle East, Iran, Somalia, Africa, Russia, China, and now Ukraine, and now back to Gaza. On this 11th day of the 11th month, we remember the armistice of World War I that commemorated the 11th hour, when the poison gas, the cannons, and the guns stopped. Now named Veterans Day, we owe to our youth the admission that the wars of the 20th century and now of the 21st, born in the competition between nations for profit and power, nursed on ideas of nationalism and racism, have been of no benefit. While our brave young men were fighting the noble cause, while they paid the ultimate price of their youth and bodily integrity and their lives, the world, captured by the ruling elites of powerful nations, is not better off now for their sacrifices, and is yet locked in violent combat for the control and exploitation of each other and of nature. To those brave young men who believed and went to Flanders, to Leningrad, to Guam, to Korea, to Saigon, to Somalia, to Iraq, our hearts are with you, the forgotten heroes of forgotten wars. To those young men and women who will be called once again, may reason and conscience be with you. Make sure that your young lives are not wasted in the struggle for the empire of elites. And if a sacrifice must be made, let it be for the battle to truly end all wars, the one to rid the world of dominating systems and rulers which live and profit as young people and nature die. This is Sandy Baird, and this is Commentary.
The forgotten heroes of a forgotten war. And the young people ask me, what are they marching for? And I ask myself the same question. And the band plays Waltzing Matilda, and the old men still answer the call. But year after year, their numbers get fewer. Someday no one will march there at all. Waltzing Matilda, waltzing Matilda, go a waltzing Matilda.